All right, we can go ahead and get started. My name is Jamie Jones. I'm in the marketing department at the Wayne State University Press. Really excited to be celebrating Margaret Noodin and Petra Kuppers' new books that have come out this year. You'll see that you've come in with your mic on mute, so please keep it on mute while the speakers are reading and conversing. But any questions you might have, you can post in the chat box, and we should have some time at the end to discuss those. I'm also going to post some links in the chat to the books so you can take a peek on our website. But right now I'm going to hand it over to Marie Sweetman, who is our acquisitions editor at the press, to get things rolling.
Hi everyone, thank you all so much for being here with us tonight to celebrate these two brilliant poets. We're very excited about these new books. Please check out those links, click them, get ready. As a starting point for us tonight, I'd like to read a land acknowledgement, though we are gathered here in a virtual space. We'd like to acknowledge that the land Wayne State University occupies is the original homelands of the Anishinaabe people, specifically the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples still connected to this land on which we gather. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers and stewards of this land. And because of the friendship and relationship between our two readers tonight, I've asked them to introduce one another. So I'm very thrilled to hand it over to them now.
Okay. Thank you so much for having us. And since Meg is reading first, I shall introduce you. Is that good? That sounds excellent. So I am just so glad to introduce to you Margaret Noodin, Meg Noodin, who is a professor in English and American Indian Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where she's also the director of the Electa Quinney Institute for American Indian Education. She is the author of an academic book and now of 2 poetry books. And I could give you more of these kinds of details of academic standing, but I really just want to speak to you about Meg as a dear friend, as someone who I've known now for over 8 years, and who is just such a fascinating person, someone with multiple interests that she's able to bring together as a poet, as an artist. So her interest in history, in revitalization, in land, in language, all come together beautifully, both in her academic work and in her creative work. And it's just been such a pleasure to hang out with you. And I'm just so delighted that we're going to be reading together. So I don't think we've ever done that. We've run symposia together. We've been in each other's classes. We've had a great time together in multiple ways, but we've never been able to be in a poetry reading together. And I'm just so honored and glad that we're doing that tonight. So Meg, I'm handing it over to you.
Miigwetchin, Petra, thank you so much. It's always a treat to be in the same space. And I would have to say as well, this, as we all get used to this sort of cyber experience that we have so frequently now, it's really wonderful to see so many of my Wayne State friends as well. I think that in the past, when I've done poetry readings, you might have another poet with you. You may have one person from the press with you. You're always meeting new people at the reading, but to have such a collection of support from both the press and other poets is really, I guess we take the silver linings where we can. So I'm really honored to have everybody together tonight. And I believe that our agenda that we decided on is that I would read just a few little things, talk a little bit, and then hand it back to Petra, introduce Petra, hand it back, and that we were going to have further conversation and leave some space at the end as well for people that are listening and might want to ask more. So I will do that. I want to, I guess, begin by saying that my approach, given a short amount of time, is to try to make sure people can hear the language of Michigan. It's also the language of Wisconsin, Manitoba. We have all of these place names in our lives that are reflecting Anishinaabe culture. And I think that we in America don't do a really great job of teaching that history. In Canada, there's been more of an effort recently to teach it, but I certainly grew up hearing just the term Chippewa, and it was a while before I realized it was the same Chippewa as there were in the state right next door to where I grew up, right? So I'll just begin a little bit by saying that when you think of the Great Lakes, if you imagine that in your head, that little spot on the globe, you can see the Great Lakes from space, a big, beautiful source of fresh water. And there are 168 nations that are in both Canada and the US now. 48 of them are on the coastline of the Great Lakes, and all of those 168 nations are part of the Anishinaabe diaspora. So people often have no idea how many nations would have been at one time speaking this language. Right now we have about maybe 8,000 speakers, that's what's estimated. And we hope that we have eventually this language echoing in all those nations. A few of them now are struggling to keep the language going. So you all have to listen and enjoy, and at some point use more of your Anishinaabemowin, because almost everyone I know lives in or around a place where they're going to use it anyway. I'll start with a poem that relates to the cover. I don't know if you guys can see the cover. It has little chickadees on it. The cover, if you read very carefully, the cover was drawn by my daughter, Nita Mazinbigekwe, who is a graduate at the University of Michigan in American Culture and Communications, and she was delighted to have these images of the chickadees used. I think she sees these chickadees as her sister and herself and I. But basically, the chickadees are always with us all year round. Chickadees are with us. And I had originally learned from my father to listen to chickadees and attempt to talk to them and try and understand what they might be saying to me. So if you are a bird watcher, you might recognize the sound of some of these lines as a little bit of an echo of what chickadees say at the end of the day in particular as they call to one another. And I'll give you the meaning in English so that you know what you're hearing when you hear it. So the title is Chickadee, and the English meaning is, the ancestors tied and extended it, the sweet grass telling us to make bundles, because the world is not yet ripe. The marsh chickadee is there in the white pine, calling out, wanting to be with us. It's a ceremony, a way to be alive. And the way it sounds in Anishinaabemowin, which was the language I wrote it in first, is Gidji-gidji-ganeshi. Now, you're probably all muted, right? So you can just go ahead and say it, Gidji-gidji-ganeshi. That's how you say chickadee. So Gidji-gidji-ganeshi. And the poem is the following. Anako-bidjigana, Anako-bidowat, Wingash, Windamawi-yangidwa, Gashki-bidjigek, Gegashka king, Gidji-gidji-ganeshi, Heagawanda, Nundagazit, Nundami-yangidwa, Manidukeyang, Manidawiyang. So hopefully you heard in that the echoes of that Gidji-gidji-ganeshi, and that first line, Anako-bidjiganak, is to literally say ancestors. Our term for great-grandparent is one that we are connected to or one that we are tied to. And the last line, Manidokeyang and Manidawiyang, a lot of people hear about Manitous, Manitou, Manitoulin, Manitoba. Manitou is a word that's very flexible, and in this case it's used to talk about making a ceremony or being part of a ceremony. You can use it lots of different ways. So that's one poem, and I realize each one is sort of a little lesson in itself. So I'll read you another one called Umpawastewin. And Umpawastewin, you might recognize as a language from a different family. It's from the Siouan language family. It's a Dakota word, and it's the name of my friend Pat Northrup, who was an amazing cook up in the Fond du Lac area. She's moved down to her home Mdewakanton community in the southern part of Minnesota now. But Umpawastewin was often at language camps, and even though she was Dakota, she supported our language as she lived with her husband, Chibanese Jim Northrup. So this was a poem written to celebrate some strawberry jam. I'll do the same thing, give you the words in English so you can know what you're hearing, and then I'll give it to you the way that I wrote it. Her name means daybreak woman. That's the title of the poem. She makes strawberry jam, mixing sweet wind and shining water, with thick wisdom, pounding, measuring, everything we've cared for, everything we've lost, the songs we've not yet sung, the feathers yet to decorate, and all the ways we've smiled, into jars, filled to the brim, to be opened when we are thin, sleeping deeply in winter, near where the tomatoes once grew. Ode mene bashka mensegan kekina gawenat, wishka animat, wase agame, ninhua kipaka neboka bigeshkarat, dilba bigenat, gakina gajawin mangirwa, gakina gawani angirwa. Nagamowin anwa nagamawiyam, niwana wawaji angirwa, eji jomingwe angopa, moshkene mudaya bekom, jibakakanet ibakadeyam, ozangwamang, ibumbesho, goganik and dajiginebego. So that's the story of Strawberry Jam. I don't want to take too much time. Maybe I'll hand it back to Petra and we'll see how the night goes. You want me to do one more? Should I?
Do one more, yes.
Okay,
We
I'll do one more.
definitely have
I'll
time
find
for
my
one more.
interactive one. I always like that one for, I think, some of these when we are all distance and in need of, I think, ways to pull ourselves together. So in the book, I have them organized a little bit by thinking about the seasons and the places that we live, and then also thinking about history as well. I guess because this is a poem for Wayne State University, maybe I'll read one that's kind of serious and it's just a poem in words. It doesn't have a lovely song to go with it, because I always think that, you know, Anthony Wayne, what a character, right? We just won't go into his history, not someone who was particularly helpful to Anishinaabe language or culture. But by irony, I would find Wayne State University Press extremely helpful and really supportive. And I continue to be delighted by the fact that my books appear with the Anishinaabemowin fully on one side and the English on the other. But when we think way, way back to colonization and the time of the fur trade, and we think about that difficult era, I decided at one point to write a poem from the standpoint of a beaver about the fur trade era. So this one's called A Time of Confusion. They don't gnaw, the ones who wink. They don't swallow, the ones who skin. They don't notice that we are roots. They don't understand that we guide the river. Bent in the wind, the foxes sniff the edge of the tree line. The pine marten eats one more mouse on purpose. The squirrels have declared war on the lost ones who explode, and the unraveling begins. Wananamizimigat, Gawin jichiguanagasewak, Jachibingwenjik, Gawin gondansinawa, Besh godwejik, Gawin mamanonen dansinawa, Ojipgan awion, Gawin nisadotan sinawa, Gikanoishagangit zibi, Wagoshuk, Wagashiwak, Gojimandamawat, Jigakwang, Wabajeshi gea be bejik onjada omoan wa wabaganujin. Jagashkandwek nandanawat, Winibash jigasajik, Bin squaw bing and amagat, ga maj tamagak. So that's your serious. But I feel like in the times we're living through, times of confusion and explosion, and knowing that you can live past the unraveling, it might be important to remember that. And then the one other one that I'll do is one that's a little bit interactive. So in your world, wherever you are, with your microphones off, if you know that Bipbagi means to call out. I have a poem that has 4 little stanzas, and it is about that time when the spring peepers emerge and they decide to start calling out. frankly, I've done this one with folks where we all had the microphones on, and it sounds quite like peepers actually, because nobody's matching, and it's good, it's kind of fun. So in your own space, feel free. At the end, I can say, we can do it together, bit boggy, just repeat it twice. I'll read you the English again so you know what you're saying. After the winter waiting, no longer half frozen by design, our calling becomes all calling. Under the rippling bark, peepers thaw, they crawl into the swamp where my calling becomes your calling. A seismic sesh, a synaptic snowstorm of springtime repetition, and your calling becomes my calling. As we drift away on our echoes, we are the details, we are the distance, and all calling becomes our calling. So here we are, we'll all read it together now in Anishinaabemowin. Ishkwa bibun be omagak gawing geabe abta nibwakamash kawanjawat bipbagi. I love you can see people getting into it. That's perfect. Nama zasaju wanagek gozimakik gi ningazeyang mi zagadoreyang mash kigong bipbagi. Ditbishko, Ditbashka, Shawabisa, Zokpok, Zigwang, Zibiskach, Midash, Bipbagi. E pichi mada ogoyang, bas weyang, besh ganawabmagak, awiyang, wasana ganawabmagak, awiyang, Bipbagi. You guys are great. So I'll maybe turn it back over. I like to take turns. I think, though, I should introduce Petra, correct? And I would do much the same thing. I think that we could remind ourselves that, Petra is a full professor at the University of Michigan, which is an amazing place to teach and work. And the scholarship that she has done there is world-renowned and of incredible caliber. But I also think it's important to say that she is someone who spends time with others and brings people together in amazing ways. I've been in spaces where movement and sound has led to healing, and people come together and manage to create something out of that togetherness that never existed before. So I'm not sure if that's called somatic theater or that's called, I'm not, you could give lots of words, but I just think that Petra really, to me, represents taking the best of our artistic skills and finding others and matching all of that together to really cause some healing in the world in a quite intelligent, brilliant way. So I give you Petra Kuppers.
Miigwech, thank you, my dear one, my dear friend. I'm so honored to read with you. But before I read, and after I say thank you once more to everybody here from Wayne, I'm so glad that you put this beautiful book baby into the world. I'm so glad that you're holding this space for us now. It's a delight to be here and to be with you all. Thank you. I come to you from Odawa territory, so I'm still in this framework, and the other way of showing where I am is Michigan. Here I am. Here I am. This means the gesture, for those of you who can't see this, I'm holding up a hand, which is a common gesture for where people show where they are in Michigan. Here's the UP, the Upper Peninsula, and here's Michigan, the Lower Peninsula, and here Frankfort, Michigan, Crystal Lake, right by the big, beautiful Mama Lake. That's where I am right now. But before I get going with my work, I want to stay a little bit longer with yours, Meg, because one of the beautiful things that you taught me recently, not just me, but also a wider community of poets, is the following words that I want to repeat, and they're very important to repeat right now. They are Apiten da gojiwak meka dewi jiwik, and that means Black Lives Matter. And it was wonderful to me that that was part of your email, part of your signature line. for a long time, and it's become something that we're repeating every time that we have the practices of hope readings that both you and I have been involved in. Yes, so I get to say those words quite often. I'm very glad I get to say them. So miigwech for all the gifts that you give to us, connecting us all up. Indeed, that's what we both try to do in the world, right? So I'm going to start by also doing something interactive, because I'm a performance poet, so that's kind of what I do. I'm going to read a poem called Asylum. The book, BOTANY, is very much about healing. It is healing after assault. It's healing after sexual assault. I'm not going to read any poems tonight that are specific to that, because even though I give you content warnings, I don't want that to be what this evening is about. So I'm giving you other poems, but I'm giving you the wider framework so you have a sense how this work emerged. Asylum was created at the Traverse City State Hospital. So Stephanie Haidt is a poet and dancer who's also here among us. And she's also my creative partner as well as life partner. And she and I ran a project called the Asylum Project for quite a few years. And in that project, we engaged with the multiple meanings of the word asylum. Asylum means many different things to many different people. So we had performances and workshops and readings in state asylums, so psychiatric asylums. We worked at spaces that were associated with immigration issues. We worked at spaces that were like sacred spaces. Asylum offered in sacred spaces of various kinds. So there's all kinds of different meanings of asylum came together in the project, where we worked with people to figure out what helped people to make them feel safe in very unsafe environments. Okay, so in order to get us going, I would love you to look around your room right now. You know, we all got to think about, what are poetry readings in times of COVID? What do we gain from this interesting new medium here? You know, the kind of world that surrounds us right now. So one of the things is that we are all in different spaces. So please look and find something that gives you comfort. Okay, whatever that happens to be for you. I'm taking this lovely velvet cushion so I can touch this cushion. This is like a stimming gesture. I come to you from disability culture, so I'm very interested in all the different things that are part of disability culture. So stimming, holding something repeatedly to make us feel good, is part of disability culture. So I have a velvet cushion. I'm looking into the screen, see what I have here. You don't have to show, but this must be something. Oh, okay, great. We have some with a candle smelling. Oh, beautiful. I love that. Scent. Yeah, great. Okay, everybody has some. Oh, beautiful. Chanika has a gorgeous photo. That's just beautiful. Thank you so much for showing that. Oh, and Mark, who's also, both Chanika and Mark have been part of Olympia's actions. Mark just wrote, the pumpkin, the pussycat, is in the bedroom. But being with pumpkin is part of your safety, your stimming behavior, so which is wonderful. Thank you to pumpkin. Okay, I'm going back to speaker view. Here we go. All right, so while I'm reading this poem, I would love you to just engage with this object and just see what happens, okay? It's a poem, so if it just flows over you, that's totally fine. There's no quiz at the end. Just see what happens as you're holding your object that gives you safety. Asylum. Smell of hair. Shirt holds compass of someone's arms. Endangered. Bed becomes mellow ocean, sails toward an invisible edge. Here be monsters. Racket beyond the door, the Cerberus demands a threshold. Nightingale sings at the wrong time, against the beat, again. Too soon, warm gruel, bedpan tilts. Ocean spills into a delta, holds nobody. No hyacinth, no round, no night flowering jasmine, no wine dark seas, no camp, no fire, just the dream of sails away. The compass of these arms empty. Dragons rise when I dream of your eyes. Your tongue turns in my heart. The key drops out of my hands into Jonah's belly, falls, elevator of despair. Knot that won't unfold in the night wind. Hurricane, cyclone, howls on the other side of the door. Gray corridor with its stripes of green and blue. Please, please let me just lie here. Pillow swimmer, duvet dreams, blood tick, till the 6 p.m. dinner tray and the yogurt cup stirred counterclockwise maelstrom for luck. Let me close the door again and dream of arms outside. All right. So that's the Asylum poem. It gives you a sense of some of the themes that are going on in here. Healing, both trauma and the reach towards something beautiful, the reach towards connection. I'm now giving you another one. It's from a different series. So there's all these different little series in it because I write poems while I'm in performance projects with people. So it's kind of part of the process of the work is to engage in writing while we're also sensing, being with, rolling over one another, which is not really very much a COVID thing to do, but we can dream of doing that again eventually. So in this one, I am in an artist residency with a dear friend, Sharon Siskin, who's a visual artist, and I'm a wheelchair user or a scooter user or a rolling around on the floor person. So different kinds of mobility, but not really walking up hills. Walking up hills, not so much. So there's all these hills around us. I can't get there. So I'm sitting on the deck of this little residency cottage, and she brings me objects that she's found out on her hikes. So she's going off like hour-long hikes and then brings all these gorgeous little things back. So one of these is found on a pond deck. So, oh yeah, I should say beforehand, the series is called Moon Botany. Okay, and they all have this slightly saucy voice. Because as you can imagine, it's not always fun to be stuck someplace while everybody else is out hiking. Okay, so saucy voice is absolutely appropriate sometimes in disability culture works, you know. Very happy that people think of me, but it would also be nice if I could just go somewhere occasionally. So maybe we could just work on that trail system a bit more. Found on the pond deck. The husk of a tiny dragonfly, translucent, clings upside down on a yellow spear of grass. Its roots clasp the dry wood of the deck. Tiny white fibers everywhere. The planks, breathing, expectorate their innards. Wood weeps and uncoils what it knew when it stood tall in a wet redwood forest before the chains of a track bed, dark and long, bite here where all trees are twisted into themselves against the prevailing winds. On that white spun deck, I remember my watery nature. Pour my liquid body to wash away the pain of the shorter years, to wash away the pain of a hollow embrace, the feeling that we all will slide, not into the clear pool, but into the murk of a place that should not be settled. All right. So there's a whole lot more of these little moon botany pieces. And as you see, they're kind of related to what we just did before, right? Where you held these objects. So this is, again, relations. It's all about relations, creating narratives, finding connections with one another. So here's another one, which I really like because it has the word deliquesce in it. And that's like one of these great words, you know, it's a poet word. You know, I don't know. I usually read that in poetry. I don't read it much else. And people don't necessarily know what it means. So deliquesce, it's a beautiful word. You can say it. Deliquesce. Exactly. It's so good to say. It means like the watery nature from the previous poem. It means just like becoming water, becoming liquid. Something deliquesce is usually when it decays. But, you know, whatever. It's just about changing that state from something solid into something watery. And it's also really good to say. So this is about a mushroom. Yeah, that's right, Mark. Deliquesce. Sorry, accents, all kinds of accents. Who knows exactly what I'm saying? Just let it wash over you. If you need to, you can hold on to your nice comfy object if you need to find ground. Found on the other side of the pond. So that was here on the deck, right, with the little cask, and over there now on the other side of the pond. Inky cap, edible or poisonous, sat out too long in the rain. Mantle erodes while you look, tears you can use for ink. These are not black marks in your book, not the liquids deliberately mingling with your blood. If your system can't take transformation, desist. Curl your fingers around fluffier stuff. The cattail's losing it too, melts down and pollutes fine dander with a seedy edge. These lines are not tears. We deliquesce, bloom out of line, without arthritic shifts, slipstream on the pond's edge. Time alchemies lift us into multitudes. Your marks edge deeper, compress. Matter out of place accumulates, grooves a canyon, stiffens your mood. All right. So little moon botany poems. Let's see what time it is now. Okay, I'll do one more. And I think I'll do for that one, I'll do this one because I'm reading with Meg. So it makes real sense to read Bug Junction. So Bug Junction is another one of these meetings, meetings between, again, insects and something else. And yes, before I go there, I also want to introduce you to one more disability culture strategy, and I'm going to do that by doing share screen. Oh, you disabled my share screening again. Do you mind giving me that control?
Sorry, it says it's available. Let's try.
You might need to make me co-host.
I'm happy to do that. Give me one second.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, thank you. Excellent. Here we go. I need to pull this up. And I'm just going to do that again. Here it is. Okay. So one of these, do you see this now? Do you really? I mean, wait, I'm not, are you seeing a picture or do you see my email box?
You see the cover of the book.
Okay, for some reason it's not on mine, but that's fine. Great, so that is the cover of the book, indeed. And one of the disability culture methods I'd like to introduce you to is audio description. In other words, co-poetrying, working together and creating poetry. And I'd like you to look at this, this object that I put in front of you and to audio describe what it is that you're seeing. And I would love to have more than one person, maybe 3 or 4 people, unmute themselves and just tell us what they're seeing, to describe what they're seeing, both as an access provision for people who don't see the screen, but also as a way of loosening up our imagination about what it is that's there. So feel free to let your thoughts or emotion flow into the description. So because I'm screen sharing, I can't see everybody in front of me. Would someone be so kind and just call on someone who's raising, who would like to audio describe? Could you just unmute yourself? I can't call on you because I can't see everybody. Thank you.
This is Mark. There is the text reads Gut Botany in an interesting kind of modern font, poems by Petra Kuppers. The cover features a gray creature, perhaps a sea creature of some kind, but on a sear landscape, a rocky landscape, perhaps even on Mars.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. And someone else, continue. How do you describe it more?
I'll jump in. This is Margaret. I'll just say really quickly that what I notice is that this fish has fish whiskers, little whiskers that droop down just under where we might imagine its nose to be, just in front of the eye. So that's the thing that tells me what type of fish it is. And I think of that old sturgeon down there that might tell stories. I'll hand it off to someone else now.
Lovely. Thank you. One more person.
This is B. Germain. I see a sea creature feeding on land skeletons prone. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. That is really interesting. I love that. Okay, maybe one more. Actually, one more. I love hearing how people describe this. So let's have one more.
Hi, this is Tacey. I'm what I can kind of see is up top. It's like very clean, and it seems like everything that's been gutted is on the bottom. It's all out and it's settled at the bottom.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. See what I mean? What we gather when we are multiple, when there's more than one voice seeing something. So that was beautiful. So I'm going to read now the poem Bug Junction, which also brings up the name of the fish that you just saw. But I really want you to keep in your ear how different people saw what we just saw differently. Red dragonfly segmented, shelves of torso, pelvis fly. Pilar structures a discursive regime I name ancestral knowledge. Wild rice moon. I cannot look you in the eye. Segmented multitudes reflect no ego spreads through antennae, sensitive bristle foot pat hair. Leaves changing color moon. Skin eye, hair eye, plates turn against one another, white glutinous pivot. Where do you touch me? Leaves falling moon. We meet, moments, hairs out, a line along my pelt. Then we part. Velcro hairs tug, hooks under my skin, raise a bruise. Freezing over moon. We lift off from one another, molecules twinned, a touch archaeology decoded by pathologists. Were we to die here, splayed yards from one another by the lake? Little spirit moon. I am not spared precarity in my occupation of indigenous lands. I cannot see the lake the way you root, drum, burn the chitin, an alarm. Big spirit moon. We live, you and I, hooks and all, our touch plates out, hum, armor invitation, a heartbeat, lean in tonight, the sturgeon satellite, suckerfish moon. Sleep weaves melatonin waves, red blood, white blood, pulse, pulse, older insects hum 1,000 dark eyes in our dream. Crust on the snow moon. Thank you. All right.
Wow, thank you both so much. That was wonderful. And I'm not sure what I was even fully expecting out of these performances tonight, but I feel taken beyond any possible expectation. So everyone, please join me in thanking our readers, and please feel free to type in any questions you might have at this time. Send them to the chat box. If you'd rather speak them, that's fine too, but please do add them to the chat box so we can read them out for better understanding. And I have a few questions that I'm happy to start with as well. So, I mean, honestly, based on these readings, I'm very moved to ask about the performance nature of this event. So I thought both of your readings were there were performances in very special ways beyond a traditional poetry reading, if there is such a thing as a traditional poetry reading. But could either or both of you speak a little bit about how and why these and Petra, in your way, this tactile and interactive performance, and Meg, you had mentioned the singing versus plain spoken words, how these are the right way to tell these specific poems.
We probably both have an answer, right?
Oh yeah, totally. You want to go first, sweetie?
Sure. I can just say that for me, writing poetry has been something I've done all my life, and I would typically write in the language that was my first language. So English was the thing that I was exposed to, the only language I was exposed to in school. As I grew older, I heard more of the Ojibwe language, but did not understand it. So I got to hear a lot of the ways it fit together and appreciate the sound of it before I was really able to appreciate the meaning. So then when I got older a little bit and learned more about the meaning and eventually became fluent enough to turn it around and create some meaning with that language myself, I still kept the love for the sound of it. So I think for me, that's partly why things are focusing on the sound, why I like to share them in a way that emphasizes the sound. And I also think I write as much for humans as for all the other sort of beings around me. So I am as likely to try and echo or speak to the water or a chickadee as I am to a person. So for me, that's why it comes out feeling a bit like a little celebration or performance when I get a chance to read. Petra, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, to me, using multiple modalities to be in touch is so important. I mean, to be in touch with other humans, to be in touch with different kind of lineages of performance, lineages of the different kinds of peoples I come from, but also being in touch with the creatures and life that surrounds me. So right now, there's a tree right outside here, a hemlock tree, and hemlock tree and I have a collaboration going on. We have for ever since COVID started, ever I've been up here, we've been with each other and listened to each other and sing to each other, and that's for me a very, very common way of being in the world. And I had you all describe this creature, the sturgeon, and I encountered sturgeons first at a sturgeon revitalization place up in Sault Ste. Marie. And there's also a sturgeon revitalization place here run by Indigenous people, not very far from here. And I'm just so glad to see these, just the babies. The babies have this incredible energy and aliveness. And I mean, they're great. And then the old ones, when you see them, like very recently, just I think 2 weeks ago, one of them washed up after the big storms at just here at the dunes, not far, sleeping by dunes. So there was this image of this giant old sturgeon. They're really rare, and it's so sad to see them go. But at the same time, it was probably just a very natural death, and just kind of washed up from the storm. So those kinds of moments is when I also get to write. I get to write with and be with and touch energies of human and non-human others, and that's a good way to do in performance. With the performance is about energy. So for me, poetry readings I don't really see too much difference between a good poetry reading that is only using spoken voice and choral delivery, and particularly I remember, Meg, you've led us many times in song, teaching language by having us all sing together. So that's to me a form of poetry as well. And all of these forms are received by the creatures that surround us.
Yes, thank you. That note on energy is right on. And I think we're developing a great energy here tonight. Chanika asked, can you also speak how audiences affect your performances, such as in relationship to language or disability community? So, Chanika, correct me if I'm wrong, but does performance change based on who you are interacting with?
Shall I take that one first?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I thrive with audiences. I'm also quite happy to understand audiences not to just be people in little boxes, you know, but also the wider world around me. To me, it's really important that there are connections. So playing with these objects that make us feel safe, getting us to think about what is in our spaces that keep us safe, particularly in these times, is a way to offer different access points into poetry or into any kind of language, of a kind of ritualized language, right? So this understanding ourselves to be in some kind of ritual format together is, to me, a way into making connections with one another. And that's what this kind of heightened language, ritualized language is about. So asking you to participate, asking you to bring your own voices into it, asking you to bring your own bodies into your own sensorium as you're listening to something is a way to open up those energy lines into ritual.
Yeah, if I had to say something just in response to this, which I'm not sure that it's a direct answer, but I would have to say that for me, I have always enjoyed doing readings or writing poems in spaces that are somehow connected to the disability community, because it always makes me rethink what community means and what systems we set up for communication or for being in the world. And so often the disability community will teach us how we've set up limitations. So there are times where I will be at an event with, very commonly events with Petra or other friends that write from a disability perspective, and I will realize, oh my goodness, just by using their own authentic perspective and kind of pointing out to the rest of the world where the limitations were, we kind of can rethink the whole system. So I know, I mean, and to me, that feels a little bit like when I try and notice other parts of the world or other ways of being in the world. Too often, I think we shut doors and we try to make it seem like there's just one way to be in the world. So for me, doing things with disability community connections has always made me see the world more widely, I think.
Yes, and Petra, I loved how you were mentioning when talking about the moon botany section in your, where that voice even expresses that frustration at the limitations of having someone else do the hiking and the retrieving of those objects. A question I had was about both of the books' preoccupation with the natural world. I think both books have a lot of water, a lot of birds, a lot of fish, and just a constant observation of environment. Where does this preoccupation come from for each of you personally? And I think we've touched on a little bit of that, but what does it mean for you to write poetry about nature or about the human body in nature? And maybe especially right now when our world, our natural world is in so many different crises.
So we take turns, right? I would say that I am always trying to find science. So I understand, you know, the Great Lakes were created here around 10,000 years ago. And it's just amazing to think how much life has been sustained in this place, you know, since the Ice Age created that spot on the globe. And when we encounter parts of it that have been here that long, the thing I picked up when Petra said to pick up something around us, I have a geode that I had gotten from an aunt, and then it had been cut open. So you see these things where you think, oh, there's just so much more that's constantly kind of hidden from us, layers in the world. And I just think so frequently I find in Anishinaabemowin, in the language, things that teach me the science and reteach me the science. So a lot of my poems start with trying to recognize the science that has, you know, been visible in this space for a very, very long time. I don't know, Petra, you have an answer?
Yeah, for me, this connection to the outsides is so much about being quite static in spaces. I'm as a dancer, my dance is quite static in some ways because I can't get everywhere. Hence, hanging out with Hemlock here because Hemlock seems to be quite static right now as well. But there's so much going on, right? There's like this whole, the air, the branches going out, the roots going down. So normally though, when I'm not being in one place, I travel a lot, I run a lot of workshops with people, and a lot of that is being very attentive to what surrounds us and finding nourishment in what surrounds us in spaces that might not be associated with the big nature hike. So a lot of my work happens to be at the edge of a car park, for instance, because that's where we can all go, right? We have this, the van, our wheelchairs and all our materials that we need in order to be safe in the world. How we can make ourselves, some of you here on the screen have been part of some of these excursions with me, and we don't get very far. We don't need to get very far. We might just get to the bushes, the tree that's right at the side. And there's then that moment when we just touch, and by the attention of our touch, we make it very special. That's a special encounter moment. I hope it's an encounter moment for the bush. I'm not sure, but it definitely is an encounter moment for us, for the people who are doing it, because we need to make that an important ritual for ourselves. Because if we only look to those things that we can't get to, that is not a good feeling. You feel excluded. Instead, there's so much riches right here. Chickadees, right? It's not like you have to go very far to find a beautiful chickadee making it sound at you. It's there for you. I know that down there, hopefully, I can see out at the lake, and I very much hope that some of these tiny little beautiful sturgeon babies are swimming around. And I'm very grateful for those kinds of edge spaces, like one of these sturgeon revitalization stations that I can actually visit. I can't go out there and fish. I don't really want to fish. I don't really want to get a fish, but I can't go and see them anyplace else. But I can go to some of these stations and see what is out there in the world, and that's very important to me. So that's why that is so much, but it's often just observed from an armchair or a hammock right here in the yard, not walking very far.
Wow, I love the idea of encounter moments, and I am going to hope very much that it is for the bush and the tree and the blade of grass as well. Thank you. Meg, so you said you looked at the science. I love that as a starting point for poetry. And I had a question for you about history and the way that your book deals with history as well as science. So you have a second section in your book titled History, and to me it read in some ways like a chronological, historical, or even prehistorical narrative. So first, do you even agree with that assessment? Is that what you were working toward? And if so, or even if not, how does history, how do you engage with history or approach history in your poetry? Do you research certain things first, or does it kind of come from what you know or are familiar with, or is there a point where you break away to do extra research? And is this a historical narrative? I guess that's a bunch of questions, but.
Yeah. Well, I would say two things. One is, the second section in the book is titled Gaia Jawebuk, which is literally what has happened. And most of these, I would say 2/3 of these poems are working poems. There were poems that for some reason, some group of people asked me to write, maybe in most cases because they felt there was a piece of history that wasn't recognized. So whether it was something about a river or a particular time period like the fur trade, or during the Water is Life, when the Oceti-Sakowin were defending their space, there were things happening, ancient things or modern things, and people wanted those recognized. So in that sort of way that I think poets and bards have always done, to compose something small that gives voice to the everyday view of what's happening, I realized I had a small collection of those. And so then I thought, before I put the book together, are there a few things missing? So there are a few where I thought, you know, things about our actual sea, things about our space, or really the ways that we are in the world, and just actually adding the piece to say this really isn't over and continues to unfold. Those I added as part of the group, but many of them were really just going into a space invited by a group of people, and very frequently they would have a piece of history they shared with me or told me, and my response was to think of how I could put that into a poem to save it. So that's kind of where those came from, and I felt like grouping them together gives us a view of what has happened here in the Great Lakes that isn't necessarily the view. You know, we just don't have that chapter on what the beavers and squirrels thought during the fur trade era. I'm waiting for that textbook. Or Madeline Island, you know, that name of that island is named for the yellow shafted flicker. And as those birds, what they do and how they are in the world and when they eat, that's a way of being in that space that's much older than all of us, but we don't often remember it their way. So I think that my history poems are often just trying to remember a space differently.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I like that. Remember a space differently. Petra, so I had spoken with you about how your book, these sections of your book are like, and I think you spoke to this a little bit, so it's sort of a further elaboration, but you mentioned during your reading that your poems come out of performances. Is that 100% the case? So if someone, I'll say when someone clicks the purchase link here and looks at this book, there's eight sections in the table of contents. And do each of those equate to a performance? Do poems ever arise outside of those? And how did these 8 performances or 8 sections of these of this book come together into this one book?
Thank you. Yes, so, well, some of them are unusual performances, you know, so performances doesn't just mean that we are in charge. Sometimes someone else is in charge. So one of them is called court theater, for instance, and that is a account of what happened when I sat in the court where the person who assaulted me, when that person went to court, basically. So that was a hard one to write, and it's a really good one to perform, and it's got a lot of energy when I perform it. So that is a performance, right? Court theater, we use that word, you know, court theater. So those are performances. Some are much quieter. Poet Drag Kings, which is the last section, is a poem of survival. It is, and it's a poem that also links back some of my histories. In that case, living in Wales for a long time. Meg, you just mentioned the bards. I'm so glad you did. You know, the bards and the druids are very much part of my lineage, the places that I've lived and the kind of people that I connected myself with. So the Bards of Wales. So we were at that sequence came out of hanging out at the pub where Dylan Thomas used to hang out. And where I used to drink, of course, as well. And I was reflecting on the fact that that I am much older than, at that point, much older than Dylan Thomas ever got to be. So there was this interesting thing about male, female, drag kings, poetry as a gendered activity, and surviving, and drinking, hanging out in pubs or not drinking, and, you know, meds, all those sorts of things were part of that one. So yeah, there's many different kinds of performances. So that is a performance of a recreation, a form of recreation of being poets in a pub, which is a very Welsh thing to be. Yeah, so those are the ways. As I put it together, it really is, I would like to invite my readers to experience themselves in difference. That is really important to me, that we understand the healing resources that we have in the world, in this loving world that surrounds us, but also in the loving kindness that we show to ourselves and with ourselves. So many of these poems do invite you, when you do read them, and you take them particularly slowly when you read them by yourselves, they invite you to find the generosity inside yourselves. Like the first poem, BOTANY, invites you to experience your innards as a place of wonder, as something that fish, sturgeons, might slip through, as something that has all kinds of different colors. And the designers of the book really responded to that request, because I asked them, and I mean, Wayne State's been pretty amazing by asking me what would I like the book to look like, and I say I'd love to have intertitles, and who gets that? I love to have colored intertitles, and they said yes. And then I just gave the instructions, the colors of the body, and this is what they gave me. Look at this. So I have these beautiful multicolored intertitles, and the designers had the fabulous idea to put the fish from the cover on upside down like this, so it looks like a human being. So that sense of fish and human merging runs throughout the book. So I'm holding up one that was sort of this maroon orangey color. Now I'm holding up a purple one. Then there's one that is, here we go, sort of a dark red, like a vein color, just beautiful. And I'm just so grateful. And also this kind of orange color. So the different colors of what we might envisage innards to look like, because that is our support system, right? The soft tissues and the hard tissues inside the human body is what we touches us, holds us, gives us structure. So that sense of structure, healing, support is very much the organizing principle for how the book came together.
Thank you so much. And I've just realized it is 8 o'clock. This has been so wonderful. Thank you both again so very much. I think inviting ourselves to be generous with ourselves is a perfect note to end on. I believe there are links in the chat to click to these books, What the Chickadee Knows and Gut Botany, both gorgeous, both so worthwhile. Please take the time to look at them. Jamie, did you have anything to wrap us up with?
I just posted a link to our events calendar in the chat too. So we're trying to do more of these virtual events. We publish a lot of fiction collections and poetry collections. So we've got some other events in the pipeline if you want to check those out. But thank you everyone for coming. And if you want to look back on this recording or share it with other folks who might have missed it, it will be up on our Facebook page and our YouTube page tomorrow. So you can check there for it. But thank you so much to the authors and to Marie for hosting. I thought this was just a really beautiful night. So thank you.
Yay.
Thanks for everyone for coming. Yes, it's so good.
Everybody.
Enjoy your rest of your night.
Have a wonderful evening,
Disability
everyone.
culture as well, right? Just so you know, this is like the deaf applause.
Yes, yes.
All over Zoom worlds. It's so great. Or jazz hands. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.